Okay, so Spirit Power Part 2. I didn't think I'd be doing a Part 2, but here we go. Um, because I left something out, which is that Indigenous people can be quite dismissive of our attempts to do our shamanic thing. And you can sometimes see people joining the bandwagon on that one. It's like, yeah, here I am, identified with these Indigenous guys and putting down what it is we're doing here. And that really doesn't help. I mean, I've been guilty of that myself many years ago because I was around an Indigenous person, and it really doesn't help. I mean, my experience has been, it's been limited, but I've been around someone who really did have a lot of depth coming from an Indigenous perspective, deeply versed in the tradition, in the stories, in the practices, knew a lot, could give nuanced answers about everything. And I learned a lot from that, but would also make fun of what it is we were attempting to do here. Now, that's easy to do. It's easy to make fun of things. We're human. We're full of holes. Yeah. Um, the important thing is to affirm that thing that is genuine in what we're trying to do. I mean, I heard the other day about another bunch of Indigenous people who are just completely dismissive of core shamanism. I suspect this is quite common. You just make fun of it. I mean, in an earlier video, I do lay into it. Yeah. It's a useful foil. It does have a lot of limitations, but it also serves a purpose. It is also helpful. It's what got me going. And I think the reason some Indigenous people can be so dismissive of our efforts is defensiveness. You look at it from their point of view, they've been overwhelmed by white culture, modern white culture, throughout the world. It's just what happens, when you get invaders. They will tend to overwhelm. You know, we've been better than a lot of invaders because we haven't completely obliterated them, although done a lot of stuff that um well, there's cause for regret, but they are feeling overwhelmed. They are defensive. So one, they don't want us coming near their traditions, and two, they put ours down. Yeah? It helps to give value to theirs. And also, well, why wouldn't they put ours down? Because there is so much wrong with our culture. It is so disconnected from nature. It's done awful things to them. So you can understand that, but you also always need to look for the good. You always need to look at, well, what is it that someone is trying to do? And you do get that amongst some Indigenous people as well. They will be generous with the teachings. They don't feel it as a threat. They know that we're going to run with them and do what we want. You can't stop people doing that. Others will shout cultural appropriation if you go near. And maybe they've got a point as well. But what's worth remembering is that it's not like Indigenous people have a viewpoint that represents some kind of singular authority. Some will go, no, don't you use our teachings, that's cultural appropriation. Others go, just go for it, do it, this is useful, the world needs it. Yeah. You'll get both these. And this is where we can claim our power. Because it's easy to feel disempowered in this sort of situation and just feel, well, we oughtn't to go near it, and it's what they say. But remember, there's different viewpoints. They're people. People are always this bunch of different viewpoints. Yeah, and if it seems like one viewpoint, well, then it's got political, and to be wary. So that's one point. Yeah. Be wary of their dismissiveness of what it is we're trying to do. I mean, they might well see genuine faults. Listen to that. But that feeling of dismissiveness, that is just so incredibly disempowering for us. Yeah. And it's a protection mechanism for them. Just don't have it. Don't have any of it. Yeah. This is where they're wrong. And when you can see when they're wrong, that re-empowers you because it takes them off that fucking pedestal that we put them on, whether they want us to or not. They're human. Of course, some of them don't mind because there's always people who like to be looked up to, always have been, always will be. And you can tell the difference. You can still learn something from them, but be wary of them. There's a story that Ron used to tell about a guy, and this is a story amongst the Indians, as they call themselves. You get a guy on the reservation, and they don't leave the reservation much. They're not seen that much. But he goes to the local town, and he presents himself as a sort of community leader. And then he goes across to Washington and presents himself as a tribal chief. And then he goes to Europe and presents himself as a medicine man. And they tell this story against themselves. It's what people do. Yeah. So people are at it wherever you go. Yeah. So, you see it in our own shamanic world. Yeah. All the time. You see people preening themselves. You see them enjoying the attention. You can see them wanting to be loved. You learn so much once you can learn to see these things. It takes quite a lot to see these things. We can feel it's wrong to do so. And we can feel it's disrespectful to do so. But then when you just see them as ordinary people and what they're up to, it gives you your power back. It gives you your power. It's how you find your power. It's by giving it away quite often. Yeah. And then reclaiming it. You can't lose your power. You can't give it away if it's truly yours in the first place. But when you've given it away and you've been burnt because you had this person on a pedestal, this great Native American teacher. Oh, I remember somebody, yeah. They had this guy over and he'd said, "Can I borrow 4,000 quid off you?" He'd been leading stuff at theirs and all the rest of it. And so they lent him 4,000 quid. This was like 25 years ago. And he goes, "That's the last we heard of him." So, and when you get burnt like that, you learn something. You take them off the pedestals and you start trusting your own guidance instead of the other person's guidance. And that's such an important phase to go through. Teaching to go through. And not everyone manages that. And we will need to be burnt along the way. Yeah? And it may take years. It may take years. I was talking to someone the other day who'd been around this teacher for 30 years and has spent the last 5 years questioning them and still going on about it, going, he plagiarized something in his book. Look, I can prove it. This is 5 years in. It's like, well, of course the guy did. Who cares? Just leave him. But no, these things go deep. And it can take us a long time to cross that bridge from being in teacher-pupil mode to really trusting our own guidance, really finding our own guidance. So this is one of the things we can really learn through having Indigenous people on pedestals. We can't help it if everyone else around us is doing it. Yeah, we get drawn into these collective attitudes with the best will in the world. Yeah, we suddenly start changing our behaviour a bit and being a bit more polite and everything because Jesus just walked in, who's from the Amazon, and we can't help it because everyone else is doing it. But if you can pull that back, if you can not, but be honest, most people won't admit to this. Most people won't admit they give their power away. But if we can just be open and upfront about it, I can still do it a bit, and it's like I'll be doing it a lot less than a lot of people because I've been around. I can spot myself, and it's so nourishing and bracing. You pull that back and you refuse. It's like, no, I'm not having it. I'm going to talk to this person just like an ordinary guy, not like someone special. So be wary of the teachers who are dismissive of what we do. Appreciate the ones who are supportively critical. Yeah, because there's lots we don't understand. In a way, some ways we're quite remote from indigeneity, so we can learn a lot. The other thing is that I've yet to meet one. My experience isn't that broad, but I've yet to meet one who can offer practices that we can usefully do ourselves. They can teach their tradition. They can maybe teach it very well. They may or may not be encouraging of us doing something with it ourselves. Here's one person who does, Jim Tree. He's written a small book. It's called The Way of the Sacred Pipe. And he's very encouraging of people doing it themselves. So there you go. That is possible. It's still an artifact from a foreign culture, but that's okay. We can run with that. Why not? We'll make it our culture. Tobacco is originally foreign. We'll make it ours. Who cares? We're global. Yeah, we can run with any of these things. But why would they be able to translate in that kind of way? And this is one of my central purposes behind the idea of chaos shamanism. Is doing that translation, is attempting to take that essence and express it in a form that we can use, a way that we can relate to, a way that we can run with ourselves. That is what is really needed. I talked about that in a much earlier video, and I'm returning to it now. We need that translation. We need to start over. And I don't think trying to return to Celtic shamanism or what was originally here is a valid means of doing that. I think that is another sidetrack. They were around thousands of years ago. They spoke a different language, yeah. We've only got bits and pieces. We're much closer to Native Americans. We speak the same language. There's lots of their stuff that's available. We can draw much more closely to that in a real kind of way because it's still living. So finding something that is our own is not the same as reaching back to the distant past, as though that is somehow deeper and more authentic. It's like, no, it's us as we are now. Yeah? With this huge mix. We're a little bit Celt, but we had, in England at any rate, yeah, it's probably the same wherever you are, yeah, certainly if you're in America, yeah, we're this melting pot of different races, yeah, since the Celts, yeah, the Jutes, the Angles, the Saxons, the Vikings, the Danes, the Romans, yeah, all these. There is no, authentic tradition from the past that we've forgotten about that we need to reclaim. It's like, no, it's us as we are now. Embrace that. Yeah, we are modern. Yeah, we have our own type of consciousness. Embrace what is good about that and learn from the indigeneity. And do this translation. Start with simple stuff. Do the pipe ceremony in a simple way, etc., etc. I'll talk a bit more about that. I'll do a video on the pipe and the sweat and what we can do with ceremony. So maybe there's two main points coming out of this. One, be wary of any Indigenous teacher who explicitly or implicitly is dismissive or takes no interest in what we are trying to do. If they're not interested in what we are trying to do, then what are they doing? Yeah, because what a good teacher does is you take the student, you try and understand where they're at, yeah, you try and help them move closer to their own guidance. Point one. Point two, you can see it sometimes when people are basically copying Indigenous people. They take the Native American songs, yeah, they take the pipe like I do, yeah. They take whatever, and they start trying to replicate them as though that is somehow they're keying into something deeper. You can see it. They're keying into something deeper. They've been initiated into that, and you haven't. Yeah, and they're doing the deeper thing. And if you're around them, you might come close to that deeper thing. Well, that's just not true. That's just not true. If you're copying something from a Siberian or Native American or Amazonian culture, actually there's a good chance there's something quite superficial going on. It hasn't got the added depth. The added depth comes from you really consulting your own experience, really being true to that, and coming from there, and maybe incorporating some of these elements that you've learned from the Amazon or Siberia or from a book. Why not? Yeah. Be like a magpie. Yeah. Steal, claim, all of that. But we need to feel our own kind of sovereignty. And if you are doing an add on of a, Peruvian medicine wheel or a North American pipe ceremony or a Siberian ritual, yeah, it's a kind of add on, maybe a useful add on. But the real depth is your own connections outside of all of that.